Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Bill Gates are among the current richest people in the world, and their combined fortunes are well over $100 billion. But even after taking inflation into account, their fortune does not come close to making them the richest people in history. This week on YTPioneers, we're going back in time to learn about the richest people who have ever lived and how they amassed such enormous wealth. And so, let's begin with number 1. John D. Rockefeller, the oil tycoon who was generally regarded as the wealthiest American of all time. With an estimated net worth of almost $400 billion in today's currency, even after giving away a sizable portion of his fortune. Yet, he had extremely modest beginnings. His father was a scam man who sold useless remedies and was frequently absent from his huge family at the time of his birth. John had started working early to support the family, so he did odd tasks like caring for the neighbor's poultry or selling candies and potatoes. John worked hard and was quite excellent at these jobs, even if they didn't pay well, so he was able to save enough money to start giving small loans to other people. Thus, his entrepreneurial inclination was present even when he was a little youngster. But when he turned 16, he stopped attending classes and began working as a bookkeeper, making only 50 cents per day. He chose to open his own produce business because he wanted to earn $100,000 and understood he would need to create something of his own to do so after working there for almost 2 years without receiving a major raise from his employers. Fortunately, his first job had taught him a lot and given him the connections, knowledge, and reputation he needed to collect $4,000 to launch his own endeavor, which was a successful company selling products like meat, hay, and grain. It made close to $500,000 during its first trading year. Naturally, Rockefeller did not retain all of that. A significant portion of it went toward business loans and expenses, but it meant that he now had actual funds to invest when a significant opportunity presented itself, and that chance was in oil. When the first oil well in America was found in 1859, the Pennsylvania oil rush was underway. Rockefeller understood that while the majority of individuals sought to become wealthy through oil drilling, the larger earnings actually came from oil refineries. Therefore, at the age of 24, he built an oil refinery with the proceeds from his first enterprise. He then encountered Henry Flagler about this time, who was eager to invest in his company. They formed the Standard Oil Corporation as a group and started the process of acquiring all of the smaller surrounding oil refineries that were in direct rivalry with them. He simply began selling his oil at a loss so that their clients flocked to him instead, driving them out of business if any of these refineries refused to sell their oil to him. The Standard Oil Corporation was able to maintain growth across the entire nation because of all these kinds of business methods. They continued to eliminate competition through acquisitions, price cuts, and cost-cutting measures. As they expanded, their negotiation strength increased, allowing them to demand better terms, rates, and discounts on everything. Also, Rockefeller had a reputation for engaging in certain dubious covert transactions. As a result, Rockefeller's oil company controlled 90% of the global oil refining market by the 1870s, when all of these contributing factors were taken into account. The proprietors of the oil refineries he purchased were also hired as a board of trustees, which meant that all of the brightest oil professionals were employed by a single mega business, with Rockefeller as its leader. He had almost 100,000 employees and owned 20,000 oil wells, which, according to some estimates, would have been worth nearly $1 trillion today. Rockefeller still had much to accomplish after building such an uncommon empire. The two largest industries at this time were oil and railroads, therefore Rockefeller set out to do with railroads what he had just done with oil. When he started to control a different market, he also started to turn into a little bit of a populist. He was seen as the pinnacle of business brutality and avarice. As a result of Rockefeller's expanding empire, legislation was passed to try and prevent this kind of monopoly. In particular, the Sherman Antitrust Act was passed, which would cause the division of Standard Oil into various companies. In contrast, many of these businesses eventually merged back together and are still in operation today, including BP and Chevron. And because Rockefeller retained ownership of all of those businesses even after they were divided, he was still the world's richest man at the time of his passing, and probably the wealthiest self-made individual in modern history. What should we genuinely think of John D. Rockefeller at this point? On the one hand, he made oil accessible to the general public and made it an affordable commodity. He started from nothing and created a commercial empire that might never be surpassed. He donated about $540 million to charity causes, ranking him among the greatest philanthropists of all time when inflation is taken into account. On the other side, Rockefeller was a cruel, greedy tyrant of commerce who occasionally utilized coercion, extortion, and exploitation of others in his ruthless rise to power, particularly the strategies employed to eliminate the competition. According to biographer Ron Chernow, his good side was every bit as good as his bad side was bad. Seldom has history produced such a contradictory figure. The fact that he amassed an absurdly large wealth and had a significant impact on society, however, cannot be denied. But hold on, we now need to go even further back in time to meet someone who, although perhaps much wealthier than Rockefeller, is still mostly unknown. Before that though, a short side note. It becomes difficult to categorically rank wealth the further back in time we go. It's much simpler when we're discussing modern history. For instance, we can claim with a high degree of certainty that Andrew Carnegie, who founded the Carnegie Steel Company, which subsequently became US Steel, the first billion-dollar firm in history, had an empire worth about $310 billion. We also know for sure that Henry Ford, who founded Ford Motor Company and invented the assembly line, had an empire worth over $200 billion when he passed away in 1947. So it is much simpler to estimate a businessman's wealth when they fit that description. Nevertheless, once we start discussing the value of owning countries and land, the picture becomes a little murkier. Several people still today would argue with the Forbes rich list, ranking Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos as the world's richest people. It's been suggested that Vladimir Putin, for example, might actually be the richest person alive right now. It's simply hard to confirm exactly what he possesses. With that in mind, let's return to our list of the wealthiest historical figures and travel all the way back to the 14th century, where we discover Mansa Musa, who many historians believe to be the richest person to have ever lived. For 25 years, Mansa Musa controlled the Mali Kingdom in Africa, which was incredibly wealthy in gold and salt. In fact, according to some reports, they produced more gold than any other country in the world and held more than half of the global supply. Mansa therefore invested his early reign in enlarging Mali's trade routes, enabling them to exchange their gold and salt all throughout Africa and Asia. The Mali Empire increased in size under his rule, and it's thought he never lost a battle throughout his lifetime. He also conquered 24 significant cities. Due to the generally good standard of living in those lands, Mansa did succeed in enticing a number of other nations to join the Mali Empire voluntarily. Mansa, though, wasn't satisfied with it. He aimed to firmly establish the Mali Empire as a global power. Being a devoutly observant Muslim, he had already made plans to travel to Mecca on a pilgrimage when he realized he might utilize the trip to draw attention to himself. And thus he started the most lavish pilgrimage in human history in 1324. Mansa Musa led tens of thousands of warriors, slaves, and heralds who were dressed in Persian silk and carried golden staff on the approximately 4,000-mile journey. According to one account, he was accompanied by up to 60,000 individuals who were each carrying hundreds of pounds of gold. It's safe to say that it was a show that attracted attention. But Mansa also reportedly built a mosque every Friday and handed out enormous quantities of wealth to the destitute people he encountered along the road. Yet, since these territories have never had so much gold before, and he was dispersing it so freely, it is also believed that his extravagant spending on trinkets during his travels produced economic instability and widespread inflation. Yet if you stop to consider that, it shows just how ridiculously wealthy Mansa Musa was. By blowing too much money on his trips, he virtually started a financial disaster. The Mali Empire had acquired Timbuktu under his orders when he finally returned from his journey, and he had made it the center of trade in the area. He had also brought with him academics and architects who worked with him to construct mosques and schools. Mansa even founded the first significant university in the area, which had one of the largest libraries in the world and could accommodate up to 25,000 students. All of these various construction initiatives helped the city's reputation grow and drew even more eminent scholars from around Africa and beyond. So, a lot of historians believe Mansa was responsible for guiding the Mali Empire to even greater prosperity and advancement. Musa did in fact succeed in his goal of putting the Mali Empire on the map, but the results weren't precisely what he had in mind. Some European kingdoms saw a chance to invade the empire and capture the resources for themselves when word of their enormous wealth and gold supplies reached Europe. Yet by then, Mansa would have passed away and established himself as one of the richest people to have ever lived. Regarding his riches, some calculations place Mansa's value in today's dollars between $400 and $500 billion. However, keep in mind that it is very challenging to compare a fortune that was founded on salt, gold, and land with today's money accurately. Therefore, I suppose you could say, treat this estimate extremely skeptically. But the question of who was the richest individual ever is still up for debate because historians aren't entirely in agreement about how to compare wealth from so many centuries ago. Therefore, let's round up this video with 3 very honorable mentions who may be contenders. Genghis Khan is one individual who might have been the richest person in human history. More than any other person in history, the ferocious Mongol leader captured an astounding 12 million square kilometers of territory between 1206 and his death in 1227. As he overcame each of these various kingdoms, he also took their riches and treasures, which, when added to the value of the land he also acquired, would have arguably been worth billions of dollars, or, to put it another way, enormous sums that are even impossible to measure. Although it is a rather cruel strategy, it was unquestionably successful. Jakob Fugger, also referred to as Jakob Fugger the Wealthy, is another contender for the title of richest individual in history. Also, a name like that requires a big wealth to acquire. In actuality, Jakob possessed 2.2% of the entire economic output of Europe during his lifetime of the continent as a whole. Jakob, who was the 10th of 11 children, went on to become a banker who provided funding for kings, adventurers, and religious figures. It's important to note, however, that before Fugger, Christians were not permitted to charge interest on loans under the law. However, he was able to persuade the Pope to modify this, and he then greatly benefited from the rule change. Fugger just seemed to have a knack for making money and identifying chances, especially when it came to business and investments, according to the author of a book published about him. For instance, Fugger made the decision to provide the loan the Archduke of Austria so sorely required when no other banker would, and it was quite profitable. Also, he was very good at persuading others to lend him money so he could invest it and make a larger return. He built a fortune that would be estimated to be worth $400 billion today because of his obviously savvy and strategic business decisions. Caesar Augustus, the first Roman emperor who ruled from 27 BC until his death in 14 AD, is the last contender for the title of richest person ever. Because he personally possessed all of Egypt, Time magazine once calculated his equivalent net worth to be $4.6 trillion today. Again, though, it's nearly difficult to estimate his wealth at this point in history. So while we can't say with certainty who will hold the record for being the richest person ever, we can say with certainty that all of the names mentioned in this video were among the wealthiest people to have ever lived and had fortunes that were, at least temporarily, significantly larger than those of Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. Of course, both of these individuals are still working and expanding their commercial empires. If any of them makes any other significant discoveries, such as colonizing Mars, who knows how enormous their riches may become. Now, though, I have a question for you. What do you think of all of these immensely wealthy historical figures? I'm aware that while hearing about wealth can inspire some individuals, it can also make some people feel extremely unfair. But if you do feel that way, it's important to keep in mind that you are much more advanced than the emperors and corporate titans from history that we just heard about because of things like access to antibiotics, electricity, the internet, and other things. You can accomplish something that Rockefeller, Mansa Musa, and the others were unable to. If you liked this video, There will be a ton more insightful and inspirational content ready soon on this channel. As a matter of fact, kindly consider subscribing and enabling notifications. This has been YTPioneers. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye, everyone!